Welcome to 41 Performance. My name's Anthony, and this is my 1968 Camaro Layla. I'm currently working on restoring her. She has no engine, transmission, or any drivetrain at all, which is why I bought a 1984 Corvette. For those of you wondering, yes, this Corvette is in bad condition, which is why I bought it for a parts car. Now, the paint's peeling, there's broken plastics, the radiator system doesn't work, the electronics don't work, the dash doesn't work, and the interior is thrashed. Now, the real reason I bought the car was for this engine and for this transmission. And in this video, we're going to be working on taking the car apart to get the engine and transmission out. First things first, let's get this hood off the car. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the struts right here and then these two bolts. Now these bolts are 7/16. Now I've also got to disconnect these wires down here. Alright, there's one final bolt right here. I'm not sure how heavy this is going to be, but I'm hoping it doesn't crush me. But I think we're about to find out, and it's going to be on video. Alright. Didn't come all the way off with that bolt. Figure it out. Ooh, okay. Oh, okay. Alright, alright. What's it on? Okay. Alright, well it's off, but it's also on. So doing this with one person is pretty hard. Okay. Alright, I was able to get the hood off. It took a lot of bit of persuasion. That fiberglass is not as light as it looks. Now next thing is going to be removing everything around the engine, radiator, intake, ignition, wiring, AC. All of it's got to go so I can pull the engine out. First thing I'm going to start with is the AC. So the reason I had to take some of the intake manifold stuff off to get the AC compressor off was because they actually routed the fuel lines through the housing of the AC pump and the tensioner pulley, and so that prevented me from pulling it right off. So I just decided to go ahead and take the fuel lines off because I had to do that anyway, because I'm going to be removing the crossfire injection system in the future. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the cooling hoses. I don't think they need to be there, but I think we can leave in the radiator and the water pump for now. Alright, that's all the radiator hoses that I want to get off. Now I think the next thing I'm going to do is just getting off all these accessories off the engine. Alright, now as I'm sure you just saw, I got the power steering fluid housing, the smog pump, and the alternator all off, along with all of their brackets. I believe that I'm going to leave everything else on the engine until it's removed out of the car. The next thing we're going to tackle is going to be getting some of this wiring off of this engine and just decluttering it. It's pretty cluttered with wires and different harnesses that I'm never going to use again. Here, as the sun is setting, I'm going to call it for the day. We got the engine stripped down to where I'm happy with it, and I think it'll be almost ready to pull out. The next thing we're going to have to do is get under the car and disconnect the transmission and take that out, and then we'll pull out the engine, and that we'll do tomorrow. All right, we're back. It's the next day, and we're going to remove the transmission. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and jack up the car. I'm going to go ahead and put a jack stand underneath the car. Alright, just grabbed another jack stand. Want to make sure it's safe. It's all safe. Now I'm going to go ahead and jack up the back of the car. Now we'll get underneath and start figuring out how to remove the transmission. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the exhaust system, and it disconnects from right here and then up there on the headers. Alright. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to drain the transmission, disconnect the transmission lines, and all the plugs from the transmission as well as the linkages. Ooh. Oh. Alright, so this is what we're looking at inside the drain pan. It's not great. Obviously water got in here. There's water still there. It's just a milkshake. The metal shavings don't seem to be too bad. Pretty normal amount, it seems like, for that what's there, but there is definitely water inside this transmission. So I'll probably be taking it apart and at least looking inside, if not doing some rebuild stuff on it. As you can see, I disconnected the transmission lines, the wiring is disconnected, and I'm actually draining the engine oil right now. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think I want to try and take the transmission and the engine out together as one piece, rather than trying to drop the transmission, because it's pretty narrow right here and I have a hard time fitting underneath. So I think it would be pretty hard to get the transmission out. Now the only thing left I have to do is the linkages for shifting. I still have to disconnect those, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Right, there is 3 linkages. One here, and then one way up here. And they're all just held in with a cotter pin. Get out the cotter pin, and the linkage just drops off. Alright, now all 3 of those are disconnected. I've got a few more things on the engine to disconnect, like the starter wire and some other miscellaneous things. And then I think we're almost ready to pull it out. Okay, we are at the end of our day today. I've disconnected everything from the engine, the power steering, the clutch line that goes to the slave cylinder, some electronics, and I've also removed the distributor, so when I pull the engine out, I'm not crushing it against the firewall. I've disconnected all of the wiring from the starter and other miscellaneous things. The only thing that's holding the engine in is the 2 engine mounts, as well as the transmission mount in the back. Everything from the transmission has been disconnected. All of the lines and wires and linkages are all gone, but I want to pull the engine and transmission out tomorrow so that I have time to separate them, put the engine on a stand, and inspect both the engine and transmission to see what I'm kind of working with. I will see you tomorrow. All right, we are back and we are ready to pull the engine. It has actually been a few days since I last worked on the car, and I actually worked on it a little bit before I started recording today, just to get the center brace that connects the transmission to the car disconnected. Without further ado, let's get this engine out of the car. Right now, as you can see, I've got the engine hoist hooked up, and now I've just got to take out the engine mount bolts. Theoretically, that should be everything disconnected from the engine and transmission. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start pulling the engine. Gotta let it back down. The bolts are out of the transmission. Well, they're loose, but they're not quite disconnected yet. Not quite out. So I've actually got to pull the bolt out, which I think I can do from right here. Okay, the final bolt is now out of the transmission. So I'm gonna go ahead and start trying to pull it. There we go. There we go. All right, I quickly had to remove the drive shaft from the transmission, and now I'm going to continue pulling the engine out. Along with the transmission, should come pretty easily. Hopefully, I'm not going to run into too many snags. Yeah, here we go. All right, let's see what I'm forgetting here. Oh, the hood latch cable. Oh, there we go. Sweet. That should be everything. Come on. All right, so as you can see, I was able to get the engine and transmission out of the car, but not without its difficulties. I actually fought it for quite a while. In our next video, we're going to be separating them, inspecting them, getting the engine on its stand, and then eventually I think we're going to end up rebuilding the engine and probably rebuilding the transmission, and then so on and so forth. Eventually it'll end up in a car someday, somehow. Not quite sure yet, but we're getting there, and we've made a ton of progress so far. Just getting the engine and transmission out is a huge step in the right direction. I love doing stuff like this, so any and all support is super helpful. If you don't mind subscribing, that would be great. Give a like to the video, share it to a friend, and I will see you next time.